Sri Krishnaya Namama Om Yat Purusham Vyaradahu Katida Vyakalpayan Mukam Kimasya Ko Bahu Ka Urupada Uchete Swaha Sri Krishnaya Namama Om Brahmano Syamukamasid Bahurajanyakridaha
जानकी वल्लभ जय सिया राम दशरथ नंदन जय सिया राम
जानकी वल्लभ जय सिया राम दशरथ नंदन जय सिया राम
जय रघुनंदन जय सिया राम.
Today on a special edition of the Vedic Empire, we're going to introduce you to two great men. One by the name of Subash Candra Bose, or Netaji, and the other, Abhay Charan De, or A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder and acharya of the Hare Krishna movement. Both of these men were friends in school in Calcutta. They both became Indian nationalists. Early on, Prabhupada was a follower of Gandhi, but he always praised Netaji for doing great works to help free India. Of course, Srila Prabhupada went beyond the nationalist theme and became a spiritualist to teach the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and spread the holy name of Krishna around the entire globe.
Friends, if you compare the history of our national struggle with the histories of similar struggles in other parties.
Today, on a very special edition of the Vedic Empire, we are going to introduce you to a very great man. His name was Subash Candra Bose, or Netaji. He was recognized by many, such as Rabindranath Tagore, as the true leader of India in its struggle against British domination. This man's message reached across all boundaries of caste, religion, ethnicity, language, to all the people of India, and they all joined behind him in his mission to free India.
But what about Gandhi? Didn't he have something to do with India's freedom? Didn't he stage that whole big thing, the sit-down movement, sew your own clothes sort of thing? And wasn't he like what did he do? What did he do to contribute to?
Actually, there's some controversy about Gandhi and his contribution to India's freedom. Most people see Gandhi as the father of modern India, but if you look at it in a accurate historic sense, he's more like a Benjamin Franklin figure, whereas Subash Chandra Bose actually took a militaristic, organizational leadership position in India's freedom struggle. So he is much more accurately can be considered the George Washington of India's freedom struggle. So basically Subash is really the father of modern India. And a lot of, as you've seen the video, many modern concepts and ideas were brought about by Subash Chandra Bose in the short time when he was leader of the provincial government of Free India.
Yeah, you always see Gandhi in the movie, that's why. I mean, he seems to be the one, you know, because he sewed his own clothes, man, and that's, you know, he was happy. And people came to beat him up, and he got salt anyway. He said, hey, you know,
he liked to get beaten up because he was so skinny, you know, he didn't know how to fight. So we will learn about the quiet Holocaust of 1943 endured by Bengal, and we will learn about the INA, Indian National Army.
Yeah, the INA, or the Indian National Army, was founded by Subash Chandra Bose. Actually, some people recognize the Indian National Army, the INA, as the creation of this army as the pivotal moment in the decline of the British Empire. Why is that? People want to know. Why? Because the British colonial empire was maintained by the British Army, and the British Army was mostly Indian nationals in the British Army, okay? He freed India because he had all those Indian troops who were no longer loyal to the British Crown. They were loyal to India. They were not going to support.
They were loyal to him.
Yeah, they were loyal to
one
Subash.
guy, one person, you know.
Yeah, and they were no longer going to support the domination of the Africans, the dominations of the Asians by the imperialism of the British. Right? They were not into it anymore. during the movie, we will be cutting in and clarifying different points and bringing up different issues that the movie hasn't really touched on. So in this way, we hope you enjoy it and you go away more enlightened about India and not just India's history, but the world history. So please enjoy Netaji and India's freedom. Jai Hind, Azad Hind.
Jai Hind, Azad Hind. Azad Hind Fauj ki jai.
Friends, if you compare the history of our national struggle with the histories of similar struggles in other parts of the world, you will realize that we in India have lacked one thing and one thing alone. We lack the strength and organization whereby we can meet force with force. I am confident that with the help of my countrymen in East Asia, I shall be able to organize such a gigantic force as will be able to sweep away the British power from India. The hour has struck, and every patriotic Indian must advance towards the field of battle. Only when the blood of freedom-loving Indians begins to flow will India attain her freedom. Inqilab Zindabad. Azad Hind Zindabad.
Our struggle is no doubt a non-violent struggle. But even a non-violent struggle demands an army, an organization, and a machinery. India is going to be free, and that we who live today are going to play a part in making India free. There is no power on earth that can keep India enslaved anymore. Let us strive for India's freedom one day more.
In 1938, Mahatma Gandhi chose a radical young colleague, Subash Candra Bose, to be president of the Indian National Congress. The following year, differences over immediate political strategy and future socio-economic policy led to the parting of their ways. But the imperatives of the Second World War brought about a measure of convergence in their aims and ideology. In 1942, Mahatma Gandhi launched a mass movement in an attempt to force the British to quit India. Outside India's northeastern frontiers, in 1943, Netaji Subash Candra Bose raised an army of liberation. To the Indian people, Netaji, their revered leader, came to represent the revolutionary current of Indian nationalism and an alternative, egalitarian vision of social transformation in free India.
I appeal to you to go out in your hundreds and in your thousands to the remote villages of India to preach the message of the Indian National Congress, which is the message of freedom. Every commodity in this world has its price. So also has freedom.
Subash Candra Bose was born in Cuttack, Orissa, on 23rd January 1897 to Bengali parents Janakinath and Prabhavati Bose. In the course of his brilliant, if turbulent, school and college career, he was inspired by the writings of Vivekananda and developed a sensitive social conscience. He displayed flashes of rebellion against the exercise of arbitrary authority, whether in political or social spheres. A student of philosophy at the universities of Calcutta and Cambridge, Subhash passed high into the Indian civil service.
Well, I have an important point to make. Subash Candra Bose, which is Netaji, and he was a schoolmate of our founder Acharya Hare Krishna movement, Srila Prabhupada. So they went together to school, and Srila Prabhupada always talked about Subash Candra Bose as he freed the India instead of Gandhi.
Yeah, Subash Prabhupada spoke very highly of Subash Candra Bose. Yeah, I'm very happy to share this with everybody.
In September 1920, he wrote to his elder brother, Sharath Chandra Bose, "National and spiritual aspirations are not compatible with obedience to civil service conditions." He resigned from the ICS in April 1921 to join the non-violent non-cooperation movement then raging all over India. Subhash accepted as his political guru Deshabandhu Chittaranjan Das, a man who shared his total dedication to the cause of India's political deliverance on the basis of Hindu-Muslim unity. But the apprenticeship in nationalist agitation and the Calcutta Corporation was cut short by Subhash's imprisonment, followed by his mentor's death. The rigors of prison life in Burma from 1924 to 1927 saw the graduation of a lieutenant to a leader. In the late 20s, Subhash Chandra Bose and Jawaharlal Nehru emerged as dynamic leaders of India's youth and spokesmen of the rising left in national politics. Subhash Bose's appearance at the Calcutta session of the Congress in 1928 was not so much a spectacle as a vision of the future. Marching a step ahead of his compatriots, he sought, despite Gandhi's opposition, to replace dominion status with complete independence as the goal of the Indian National Congress. He was narrowly defeated in 1928. When the famous resolution calling for Purna Swaraj, or complete independence, was passed a year later at Lahore, he went a step further in calling for a total boycott, a shadow government, and a movement to assert the rights of three large oppressed communities: women, the so-called depressed classes, and the laboring masses. When he was not in prison in the early 1930s, he served as mayor of Calcutta in 1931 and took part in the civil disobedience agitations. A seriously ill Subhash was released from detention only after he had boarded ship for Europe in February 1933. Bose's enforced exile in Europe from 1933 to 1936 witnessed the transformation of a leader into a statesman. As unofficial ambassador of India in bondage, he traveled tirelessly, establishing organizations and winning friends for the cause of India's freedom in Europe. He visited Austria, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Romania, Poland, Belgium, France, Greece, Egypt, Ireland, Switzerland, Hungary, Turkey, Italy, and Germany. He made strong public protests against Nazi racism and denounced the new German nationalism as not only narrow and selfish, but arrogant. The high point of his European sojourn was his visit to Dublin, where he held several rounds of talks with Eamon de Valera. Although he was barred from visiting Britain, he expounded on his political philosophy of anti-imperialism and Samyavada, an Indian variant of socialism, in an important speech written for a London conference. His major work, The Indian Struggle, was written in 1934. By 1937, the Bose brothers of Bengal, Sharath and Subhash, had returned from long years of imprisonment and exile to become key players on the All India political stage. In 1938, Subhash became the youngest president of the Indian National Congress. At Haripura, Subash Candra Bose articulated his views on a range of key issues. On the question of political freedom, he wanted to erase every trace of British domination, but saw prospects of cordial relations with the British people once India had real self-determination. On political democracy, he came out in favor of multiple parties and intra-party democracy within the Congress. On the communal problem, he advocated a policy of live and let live in matters religious and understanding on matters economic and political. He suggested that Hindustani, a mixture of Hindi and Urdu, written in the Roman script, would be the best link language for India, and promised cultural autonomy for religious and linguistic minorities.
Friends, those of you who are poor and obscure, I should like to see your poverty and obscurity devoted to the service of your motherland. Work that she might prosper, suffer that she might rejoice.
As Congress President, Bose negotiated with Muhammad Ali Jinnah, President of the Muslim League, in an attempt to undo the damage caused by Congress's rebuff of the League following the 1937 provincial elections. Looking to the future, Bose established a national planning committee to draw up blueprints for the social and economic reconstruction of free India. By 1939, Bose's honeymoon with the Gandhian right wing of the Congress was over. In a bitterly contested election, he won a second term, defeating Gandhi's nominee, Pattabhi Sitaramaiah. From his sickbed at the Tripuri session of the Congress, the elected president had to contend not so much with the colonial masters, to whom he wanted to give a 6-month ultimatum to quit India, but with the animosity of his defeated colleagues. The right-wingers were able to push through a resolution requiring the President to appoint the Congress Working Committee in consultation with Mahatma Gandhi. Thereupon Gandhi decided on a course of non-cooperation, refusing to suggest any names. Unable to break the deadlock, Subhash Candra Bose resigned as Congress President at a meeting of the All India Congress Committee in Calcutta in April 1939.
When Gandhi and Nehru totally rejected Subash Candra Bose and his quit India within 6 months ultimatum, then that really threw a wrench in everything, I think, and that's the moment when Netaji had to just say, this is it, this is our golden opportunity. Forget trying to deal with the British in a nice way. And what did he do? He contacted the Germans and he contacted the Japanese, who are actively against Britain. Why? Not because he idolized Hitler or he loved the Japanese. No, because he loved India and he wanted to free India, and he would take any means, unite with anyone, like the saying, your enemy is my enemy type of thing. So he joined with the enemies of his enemy in order to free India, not with some love for fascism, which some Western scholars try and misinterpret Subash Candra Bose's life as. They think he was like a Indian Nazi or something, and not at all. And the video clearly states his position on Nazism, and he had no love for that. He was not a National Socialist. He was not a
communist. He wasn't
not a communist.
Those of you who are poor and obscure, I should like to see your poverty and obscurity devoted to the service of your motherland. Lord, that's my suffer.
Throughout the bruising political battles of 1939, Subhash received the unflagging support of Rabindranath Tagore. The poet welcomed in his abode of peace, Shantiniketan, the rebel leader of the nationalist movement. In a glowing eulogy, Rabindranath hailed Subhash as Deshanayak, leader of the country, and expressed confidence that his apparent defeat would be turned into a permanent victory. In August 1939, Bengal's two luminaries came together in Calcutta to articulate their dream of a Mahajati, a great and dignified expression of Bengal's nationhood.
বাংলা জাতির যে শক্তির প্রতিষ্ঠা করবার সংকল্প করেছি তা সেই রাষ্ট্রশক্তি নয় যে শক্তি শত্রু মিত্র সকলের প্রতি সংশয় কণ্ঠকিত। জাগ্রত চিত্তকে আহ্বান করি, যার সংস্কার মুক্ত উদার আতিথ্যে মনুষ্যত্বের সর্বাঙ্গীন মুক্তি অকৃত্রিম সত্যতা লাভ করে। এখান থেকে এই প্রার্থনা মন্ত্র যুগে যুগে উচ্ছ্বসিত হতে থাক। বাঙালির পণ, বাঙালির আশা, বাঙালির কাজ, বাঙালির ভাষা। সত্য হোক, সত্য হোক, সত্য হোক হে ভগবান। বাঙালির প্রাণ, বাঙালির মন, বাঙালির ঘরে যত ভাই বোন, এক হোক, এক হোক, এক হোক হে ভগবান। সেই সঙ্গে কথা যোগ করা হোক, বাঙালির বাহু ভারতের বাহুকে বল দিক, বাঙালির বাণী ভারতের বাণীকে সত্য করুক।
In September 1939, the Second World War broke out in Europe. Without caring to consult Indian opinion, Viceroy Linlithgow declared India to be a belligerent in the war against Germany. The Congress ministries in 8 out of the 11 provinces of India resigned in protest. In 1940, Gandhi launched a campaign of individual satyagraha, asking his followers to make anti-war speeches and court arrest. Subhash Bose, who was by now leading a group known as the Forward Bloc within the Congress, toured the country seeking to consolidate leftist forces on a platform of uncompromising anti-imperialism.
অনেকে আমাকে প্রশ্ন করছেন যে কংগ্রেস সভাপতির পদ ত্যাগ করবার পর আমি কি করব। এর উত্তরে আমি সর্বপ্রথমে আপনাদের স্মরণ করিয়ে দেব যে আজ ভারতবর্ষের সম্মুখে একটা মস্ত বড় সুযোগ উপস্থিত হয়েছে। এই সুযোগ যদি আমরা গ্রহণ করতে পারি, যদি ঠিক পথে চলে কৌশল অবলম্বন করে আমরা জাতিকে আমাদের গন্তব্যের পথে পরিচালিত করতে পারি, তাহলে অদূর ভবিষ্যতে পূর্ণ স্বরাজ লাভ করা আমাদের পক্ষে মোটেই কঠিন হবে না। This is an opportunity which is rare in the history of a nation. I am sure, and I believe you, my countrymen, will agree with me that this is an opportunity which we cannot afford to lose. which India will not lose.
In July 1940, for the 11th time in his political career, Subash Candra Bose was cast into prison. In late November, he went on hunger strike, telling the government, "Release me or I shall refuse to live. The individual must die so that the nation may live. Today, I must die so that India may live and may win freedom and glory." The government released him on 5th December 1940, having devised a cat-and-mouse policy, according to which Bose was to be rearrested as soon as he recovered his health. Meanwhile, his house on Elgin Road would be kept under round-the-clock police watch. The government released him on 5th December 1940, having devised a cat-and-mouse policy.
On the night of the 16th, 17th January 1941, Netaji and we tiptoed out of that room, walked down the entire length of the house, down that corridor, down the passage in the annex of the house, down the rear staircase. Took a turn to the right and to the south to mislead any possible watchers, but eventually took the Grand Trunk Road and drove the whole night to reach Dhanbad early in the morning. We kept Netaji hidden in my brother's house at a place called Barari near Dhanbad. And the next evening, we bade him goodbye as if he was a stranger, then picked him up again in my car from the road and drove him up to Gomo station and reached him there to catch the Delhi Kalka mail on his way to Peshawar.
Subash Candra Bose was received in Peshawar by Mian Akbar Shah. He then hitchhiked across the frontier to Kabul. After a number of tense weeks in Kabul, Bose acquired an Italian passport, took the name of Orlando Mazzotta, and traveled by car and train to Moscow, from where he flew to Berlin. Although he held the Nazis in deep contempt, Bose went to Europe in order to gain access to Indian soldiers in the British Indian Army. He clearly identified this army as the ultimate instrument of colonial control. A domestic rod of order and an international fire brigade, it had been used to protect Britain's imperial interests, not only in India, but in the Caribbean, Africa, the Middle East, China, and Southeast Asia. Bose was determined to subvert the loyalty of Indian soldiers to the King Emperor and replace it with a new loyalty to the Indian people and nation.
In diesem Kampf, der für Indien ein Kampf Sein oder Nichtsein ist, kann es nur einen Ausgang geben, unseren gemeinsamen Sinn.
From among Indian prisoners of war being held in Germany and Italy, Bose recruited an Indian legion. Other Indians resident in Europe, especially young students, helped him organize the Free India Center. It was in wartime Europe that Netaji, along with Abid Hassan and other associates, coined India's national greeting, Jai Hind. In June 1941, he denounced Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union, which wrecked his plans of an armed thrust by his Azad Hind Force into India from the northwest to help the unarmed freedom fighters at home. While waiting to find a way out of Europe, he tried to build in exile a microcosm of the free India of his dreams.
Home in prison, let him mouth off in prison, you know, let him starve, yeah. But then Subash knew the strategy. So you'll see in the video, he had a great escape. And so from then he escaped India, went through Afghanistan, made his way into Europe and became the ambassador for Free India. He met up with Hitler and the Nazis. And at the time, the Germans and the Soviets were allies, basically. And so Subash, he had high hopes that he was going to work with the Germans and the Soviets and have an army coming through Russia down into Afghanistan, come into India and start a war of independence, and that was his plan. But of course, all that was, that plan was screwed up when Hitler invaded the Soviet Union. And that was the end of that. So then Subash Candra Bose spent some time, you know, working on the intellectual front, trying to gain intellectual support, trying to gain, you know, support of the population. Okay, it is very important to remember that some of the anti-British or anti-European content of our show is in no way to be taken as racism, because due to the historical context of India's recent history, the British had their empire in India, so that is why a lot of times you'll see things that seem anti-British, but it's nothing against the British people, and there are many great British people.
After attacking Pearl Harbor in December 1941, Japan swept across Southeast Asia, destroying British imperial interests in that region. By March 1942, they had reached the gates of India. President Roosevelt of the United States and Labour Party ministers in Britain's war cabinet felt that something needed to be done urgently to conciliate Indian nationalist opinion. The British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, reluctantly sent out Stafford Cripps in the spring of 1942 to hold talks with Indian political leaders. Cripps had little of substance to offer during the war, but held out promises for the future. Gandhi reportedly scorned the Cripps offer, likening it to a post-dated check on a bank that was obviously failing. Meanwhile, Bose sought a clear declaration on the part of the Axis powers recognizing Indian independence. Mussolini was amenable to issuing such a declaration. But at Bose's only face-to-face meeting with Hitler, the German Führer hedged on the question of the declaration and on Bose's demand that references offensive to Indians in Mein Kampf be expunged. What Bose was able to extract from the Germans was logistical help to travel to Asia. Back in India, on 8th August 1942, the Congress under Gandhi passed a historic resolution moved by Nehru, demanding that the British quit India. We must take the risk of violence, Gandhi declared, to remove this great calamity of slavery. I will prefer anarchy to the present system of administration, because this ordered anarchy is worse than real anarchy. Gandhi's decision to launch a mass movement at this juncture appeared to be a vindication of Bose's line of thinking. Netaji made broadcasts to India in support of the movement, but he privately feared that the internal uprising had occurred too soon. The British resorted to ruthless repression to crush the Quit India movement in urban and rural areas alike. In early 1943, Subash Candra Bose wrote out a letter in Bengali for his elder brother, Sharat. Today, I am once again embarking on the path of danger, but this time towards home. I may not see the end of the road. I have married here and have a daughter. In my absence, please give my wife and daughter the love you have given me throughout my life. On 8th February 1943, Netaji and his associate Abid Hassan began a perilous 90-day submarine journey. Starting from Kiel in Germany, they traveled around the north of Scotland, went down the length of the Atlantic Ocean, and rounded the Cape of Good Hope. Netaji was transferred in rough seas in the Indian Ocean from a German to a Japanese submarine. In the Japanese submarine, he passed south of India on his way to Sumatra, from where he flew to Japan.
India and Japan have in the past been bound by deep cultural ties which are about 20 centuries old. In recent times, these cultural relations have been interrupted because of the British domination of India. It is, however, certain that when India is free, these relations will be revived.
On 2nd July 1943, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose arrived in Singapore.
सुभाष मान हिंद है, सुभाष आन हिंद है, सुभाष शान हिंद है, सुभाष जी वो जान हिंद आ गए, नाद जिस हिंद को वो शान हिंद आ गए, सुभाष जी वो जान हिंद आ गए, नाद जिस.
On 4th July 1943, at a representative assembly of Indians living in Southeast Asia, Netaji accepted from Rash Bihari Bose the leadership of the Indian independence movement.
Friends and comrades in arms, you might ask me what I did in Tokyo for what present I have brought for you. Well, I have brought for you this present.
In ringing tones and elegant Hindustani, Netaji spoke to the assembly, offering those who were prepared to follow him nothing but hunger, thirst, privation, and death, on the historic march that would culminate in a victory parade at the Red Fort of Old Delhi.
जब हम फिर लाल किले दिल्ली में जाकर वह हमारे विक्ट्री परेड करेंगे, हमारे रास्ते में आएगी भूख, प्यास, तकलीफें, दीवतें, मौत। कोई नहीं कह सकता है कि लोग इस जंग में शरीक होंगे, उनसे कितने लोग निकलेंगे जिंदा होगा। कोई बात नहीं है, हम जिंदा रहेंगे या तो मरेंगे, कोई बात नहीं है। बात तो सही बात यह है, अहम बात यह है, आखिर में हमारी कामयाबी होगी, हिंदुस्तान आजाद होगा।
On 5th July 1943, Netaji announced to the world that India's Army of Liberation, the Azad Hind Fauj, had come into being.
Our countrymen and our sisters and brothers at home have been doing their best in the circumstances in which they are placed. But the enemy is ruthless and desperate, and he is armed to the teeth. Against such a brutal foe, no amount of civil disobedience or of sabotage or of revolutionary terrorism can be of any avail. If therefore we want to expel British power from India, we have to fight the enemy with his own weapons. The enemy has already drawn the sword. He must therefore be fought with the sword. But it is not possible for our countrymen at home to organize an armed revolution and to fight the British army of occupation with modern arms. This is a task which must therefore devolve on Indians living abroad, and particularly on Indians living in East Asia. Friends, if you compare the history of our national struggle with histories of similar struggles in other parts of the world, you will realize that we in India have lacked one thing and one thing alone. We lack the strength and organization whereby we can meet force with force. I am confident that with the help of my countrymen in East Asia, I shall be able to organize such a gigantic force as will be able to sweep away the British power from India in conjunction with those who have already been fighting at home. The hour has struck, and every patriotic Indian must advance towards the field of battle. Only when the blood of freedom-loving Indians begins to flow will India attain her freedom. Inqilab Zindabad. Azad Hind Zindabad.
He was a leader. Now you see me, I have broken down. And 40 years, 50 years, and there are people like me who are prepared to do anything for Netaji. I am very lucky. I have worked with Gandhiji, I worked with Panditji. They were all very great. Very, very great. India is proud of them. But there is only one person for whom I will die. And I will die 100th time. And that is Netaji. So what was in that man? And there are thousands like me who are prepared to give everything, everything. And that's all over India, from every part of India, every community.
As tens of thousands of former soldiers of the British Indian Army agreed to join the Indian National Army, and an overwhelming majority of the 2.5 million Indian civilians in Southeast Asia responded with unprecedented fervor to the call for total mobilization, Netaji was able to systematically demolish colonial stereotypes of martial and non-martial races and castes. Members of all castes, creeds, and communities rallied to the cause of the Indian National Army. There were Muslims and Sikhs from the northwest frontier province and the Punjab. There were Tamils from South India. There were battle-hardy professional soldiers, and there were new recruits drawn from the large population of rubber plantation workers. For the first time, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, and Christian soldiers sat down to dine together. Hindustani written in the Roman script became their lingua franca. In another revolutionary move, Netaji formed a women's regiment of the Indian National Army, named after the legendary heroine of the 1857 revolt, the Rani of Jhansi. This regiment, commanded by Lakshmi Swaminathan, was designed to contribute not only to national liberation, but more importantly, to the social emancipation of Indian women.
Women also have to fight for their freedom, and in the case of women, they will be fighting for two things. One, the independence of their country, and the second thing is their own independence and emancipation. Because he said, I have always felt very strongly that our Indian women who are capable of reaching tremendous heights, they are so completely neglected. Not only neglected, they are suppressed by our archaic social laws. So unless they fight for their own emancipation along with the freedom of the country, our country also won't progress in the right direction, and this is a very necessary thing.
As the Indian National Army prepared to invade northeastern India, Netaji's home province, Bengal, was being devastated by a man-made famine. The British were only interested in provisioning their own troops and industrial workers engaged in war production. It was a quiet holocaust in which nearly 3.5 million people lost their lives. On 1st September 1943, Netaji asked the British to provide safe passage for ships which would carry relief supplies of rice from Burma. The government nervously suppressed the news of this offer, along with news of all other activities of the INA. In radio broadcasts beamed towards India, Netaji tried to bolster the morale of his compatriots at home.
স্বাধীন ভারতে সকল কারাগারের লৌহ কবাট উন্মুক্ত হইবে এবং ভারত মাতার শ্রেষ্ঠ সন্তানেরা তখন কারা প্রকোষ্ঠের অন্ধকার হইতে মুক্তি ও আনন্দের নির্মল আলোকে বাইর হইয়া জয়মাল্যে ভূষিত হইবেন। ইনকিলাব জিন্দাবাদ, আজাদ হিন্দ জিন্দাবাদ।
On 21st October 1943, Netaji proclaimed the formation of the Provisional Government of Free India in Singapore.
पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा चंचल सागर विंध्य हिमालय नीला यमुना गंगा तेरे नित्य गुण गाये।
In November 1943, Netaji attended the Greater East Asia Conference in Tokyo. Although he went as an observer, his eloquent speech appeared to dominate the proceedings. He held a summit meeting with Premier General Tojo, which enabled the Azad Hind government to resolve difficulties it was having in dealing with some of the more arrogant and short-sighted Japanese officers.
Your names will go down in history, not merely as the makers of a new republic, not merely as the makers of a new East Asia, not merely as the makers of a new Asia, but as the makers and the architects of a new world.
The Azad Hind government acquired its first territories when the Japanese handed over jurisdiction of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands in the Bay of Bengal. During a visit in December 1943, Netaji paid homage to generations of revolutionaries who had spent life sentences in the notorious cellular jail on Andaman Island. Netaji renamed the two main islands Shaheed and Swaraj.
ऊंचा है दुनिया में झंडा हमारा नेताजी जिंदाबाद आजाद करेंगे सबसे ऊंचा है दुनिया में झंडा हमारा।
In January 1944, by arrangement with Burmese leaders Ba Maw and Aung San, the INA headquarters were moved forward to Rangoon. The INA went into action against the British forces on the Arakan front. On 18th March 1944, the soldiers of liberation crossed the Indo-Burma frontier and, advancing towards Kohima and Impal, planted the tricolour on Indian soil.
पार करो हम भक्तों का उद्धार करो शिव शंकर बेड़ा पार करो हम भक्तों का उद्धार करो शिव शंकर बेड़ा पार करो हम भक्तों का उद्धार करो।
This way Hitler arranged a submarine ride for Subash Candra Bose, and he made his way to Japan, and from Japan he made his way to Singapore, and he got the millions of Indians that were under Japanese control in the once British East Asia areas of Burma and Singapore and Malaysia, and he got them united into an Indian National Army. And as you'll see on the video, he got together a huge organization, and then the Japanese gave him the islands of Andaman and Nicobar, which are in the Bay of Bengal, and that was the first time the flag of the free India was raised on Indian soil. And you'll see that in the video also.
Because all the Andaman Nicobar Islands, Indians we call it Kalapani, and Kalapani means death island. There was a big prison like Alcatraz we have in America, and all the worst ones went to Alcatraz. The same
but isn't it terrible how all those horrible people were there?
Because Alcatraz was at least a little better. It was in the San Francisco Bay, so at least you can look at like Bay, you know, you can see some, you know,
Real
civilization
life.
or something. But in the Kalapani was the worst of worst. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's the volcanic islands. There isn't no food. There's all snakes there, and it was heaven, but it was like a hell in one sense because it was only a prison.
But isn't it terrible that the cream of India's elite, intellectual elite, their freedom struggles, some
But a lot of freedom
literal
fighters were
sent
sent
there.
off to there too.
Yeah.
Anyways, I have more things to tell, but do you think we can explain about it?
Well,
if you noted that the war cry was on to Delhi, this may seem peculiar to some of you who are not familiar with what Delhi represents in the mind of the Indian nationalist.
It's no coincidence that that was their war cry, because Delhi was the ancient Vedic capital of not only India, but of the whole world. In ancient times, Delhi, or New Delhi, was called Hastinapur. And this obviously, Subash Candra Bose, was rooted in Vedic tradition. And so that is why they had their war cry, on to Delhi. The most authoritative Vedic scholar of the age, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, has also confirmed this point that Delhi was the ancient capital of the world and was called Hastinapur.
Maharaj Parikshit, 5,000 years ago, he was the emperor of the whole world. Formerly, up to 5,000 years ago, the whole world was being controlled and ruled over by kings whose capital was Hastinapur, New Delhi. There was only one flag, only one ruler, one scripture, Vedic scripture, and the Aryans, the Arya, they were the civilized person.
Got together his army, the Indian National Army, the INA, and they invaded India from the Burmese border into Assam, Imphal, and I don't remember the exact date, it's in the video, in March sometime. The flag was raised on the subcontinent of India by a free Indian army for the first time, which is also a historic event which has not been recognized enough.
They used to call that a northern frontier. They at that time they didn't have it. It's called the seven mountains of that area, and they still call it Assam and Thimphu and Imphal and Manipur and all that.
The Battle of Imphal turned out to be one of the bloodiest battles of the Second World War. The British had an ally with power and wealth in the United States. The Japanese, badly overextended in the Pacific, were unable to supply the INA and Japanese forces fighting in India. Thousands of INA soldiers became martyrs in hills and jungles of northeastern India. Others fought brave rearguard actions down the Irrawaddy Delta of Burma in late 1944. Then, in the spring of 1945, they made an epic retreat with their leader on foot from Burma to Thailand and back to Malaya. The march to Delhi had been halted at Imphal. But, as Netaji had prophesied, the roads to Delhi were many, and Delhi still remained the goal. In the weeks before the war ended, a memorial was erected on the sea face at Singapore to the fallen heroes of the INA. On it was inscribed their motto, Ittifaq, Itmad, Qurbani, unity, faith, sacrifice. In an intemperate act of vandalism, Mountbatten's forces blew up this monument to the war dead on their arrival in Singapore. As the Japanese surrendered in mid-August, Netaji decided to try to make contact with the Soviet Union. He flew from Singapore to Vietnam and then took off again from Saigon on 17th August 1945. He was reported to have been killed in an air crash in Taiwan on 18th August 1945. But a great majority of the people of the subcontinent have refused to accept that he is no more and have waited ever since for their leader to return. The end of World War II did not ring down the curtain on the saga of Netaji and the INA. In the autumn of 1945, nationalist forces inside India were despondent and in disarray. At that critical moment, the Indian National Army, in the form of tens of thousands of prisoners of war, and the story of their amazing struggle between 1943 and 1945, descended upon the Indian political scene as a godsend. To the people of India, it was a rejuvenating and revolutionizing experience. The British, on their part, made a major error of decision by putting on public trial at the Red Fort 3 INA officers charged with waging war against the King Emperor. Shah Nawaz Khan, born in a Muslim family of Janjua Rajputs in Rawalpindi; Prem Sehgal, born in a Hindu family at Hoshiarpur; and Gurbaksh Singh Dhillon, born in a Sikh family in Lahore district.
Before our trial started, the British had kept everything concerning Netaji, the movement, the INA, everything under wraps. People didn't know anything about it. The whole idea was that they wanted to show to the Indian people that a few renegades had joined the Japanese, but once the trial started, the truth came out. And when the truth came out, it had impact not only in the Indian public, but also in the British Indian Army.
The Indian National Congress formed a team of defense lawyers led by Bhulabhai Desai and including Jawaharlal Nehru. Mahatma Gandhi hailed Netaji as a prince among patriots and said of the INA, "They have a lot to their credit of which they might well be proud. The greatest among these was to gather together under one banner men from all religions and races of India." Other political parties, including the Muslim League, came out in support of the men and women of the INA. The court-martial sentenced the 3 INA officers to deportation for life. But the Indian people were on the side of Netaji's soldiers, and the sentence proved to be politically untenable. No longer certain of the Indian soldiers' loyalty to the British Crown, Commander-in-Chief Claude Auchinleck decided to release Sehgal, Dhillon, and Shah Nawaz. Netaji Subash Candra Bose provided to his countrymen in 1945-46, in absentia and as a direct outcome of his wartime activities, a unique opportunity to realize the aims of complete independence and the federal union. He paved the way for the liberation of other subject peoples of the British Empire by destroying the most vital instrument of colonial subjugation, the British Indian Army. By a tragic irony, the man who commanded Indian history in the winter of 1945-46 did not appear. The country paid the price of refusing to heed his warning never to compromise with injustice and wrong, when dominion status came to a partitioned subcontinent in 1947. Nobody can lose, Netaji had written in his political testament in 1940, through suffering and sacrifice. If he does lose anything of the earthy, he will gain much more in return by becoming the heir to a life immortal.
We are conscious that the soil of India is going to be the last theater of war in this part of the world. Friends, I do not know how many of us who are going to participate in the coming battles will survive to see India free. But whether we survive or not, whether we individually live to see India free or not, we are confident that India shall be free.
जाएंगे हम अपनी हिंद बनाएंगे, हम दिल्ली दिल्ली जाएंगे, हम अपनी हिंद बनाएंगे। अब फौज बन के रहना है, दुख दर्द मुसीबत सहना है, अब फौज बन के रहना है, दुख दर्द मुसीबत सहना है। सुभाष का कहना है, चलो दिल्ली चल के रहना है, सुभाष का कहना है, चलो दिल्ली चल के रहना है। जाएंगे हम अपनी हिंद बनाएंगे, हम दिल्ली दिल्ली जाएंगे, हम अपनी हिंद बनाएंगे। हम गोली खा के झूमेंगे, हम मौत को बढ़कर चूमेंगे, हम गोली खा के झूमेंगे, हम मौत को बढ़कर चूमेंगे। मतवाले बन आजादी के हम दरिया जंगल घूमेंगे, मतवाले बन।
In his final exhortation to India's Army of Liberation, Netaji Subash Candra Bose declared in 1944.
We are conscious that the soil of India is going to be the last theater of war in this part of the world. Friends, I do not know how many of us who are going to participate in the coming battle will survive to see India free. But whether we survive or not, whether we individually live to see India free or not, we are confident that India shall be free. We are confident